To have Lieutenant Colonel Allen West back with us once again. Alan, thank you so much for your time today.
Peter, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and greetings to all of my country cousins over there across the pond.
Great to have you. And I remember the last time you were on actually was just after we started streaming on War Room, which was end of September. So I vividly remember the last time you were on, because I think you were our second guest having streaming. So great to have the War Room posse joining us. Obviously, we're doing this a few days before. People can find you at Allen West is your Twitter handle. All your Substack information, everything else is in the description. And there are lots to talk about. Obviously, we've had the primaries just happening with the latest two. Poor Nikki Haley hanging on. We'll get into that. But if I could start, first of all, with yourself. You are the candidate for Dallas County GOP chair. Maybe you can tell us why you're running for this position and what's your plan for Dallas County. I think for UK viewers, we think Texas is Republican. That's not the case. So enlighten us, please.
Yeah, sure. I was the state party chairman as well. And a lot of people have, came to me and asking me, can you help us here in Dallas County? And at first I said no, because, I kind of just, got a lot of stones in my kit bag right now. But when you sit back and you look at the situation in Dallas County and what the progressive socialist left is doing across the country in red states, what they do is they come in and they take over the major urban population centers. And even though, Texas may be considered, a red state, when you look at our major centers of Dallas, Austin, Texas, which is the capital, Houston, Harris County, San Antonio, El Paso, they're all controlled by the progressive socialist left. And as a matter of fact, we just had the finance reports that were released last week, and we have seen that George Soros is dumping $2.5 million into Texas, and he's focusing on 3 different counties in Texas, and that is Cameron County, Hidalgo County, which are down along the border, and then Dallas County. And so you ask, why would George Soros care about Dallas County? Well, in the last presidential election cycle, Democrats outvoted Republicans in Dallas County by 291,076 votes. And going into this election cycle in Dallas County, we have 75% of the countywide positions that are up for election that are unopposed. And we have 73 judicial positions here in Dallas County that are unopposed. And you can't win this way. And so the other thing that is of grave concern to us here is, in a county, you have different voting precincts. And in Dallas County, we have 861 voting precincts with registered voters. Well, Republicans only have a little over 200 precinct chairs. So if you don't have that strong game on the ground, which means you have less than 25% people that are, organizing and making sure people have registered to vote and getting them out to vote, this is why they're targeting Dallas County. And I think that it's time that we do something to make sure that, number one, we can go out there, we can recruit candidates and get them running in these races. Number two, we've got to do something about recruiting precinct chairs so we can have an effective ground game. And number three, we have to do something to maintain the election integrity, because unsolicited mail-in ballots, not a good thing. A lot of chicanery happens at the end of early voting. We want to preclude that. We want to get back to precinct level voting. So there are some issues in Dallas County, and this is important because remember, President Trump only won Texas 4 years ago by 6%. And so obviously they think that they can make up that difference in 3 counties, and Dallas being the premier one.
Has Texas changed? Because again, here in the UK, we see it as a red state. But tell us the changes that have happened. You know Texas very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, what has happened in Texas is that when you go out and you ask these businesses and corporations to relocate here to Texas because of your economic policies, your tax policies, and what have you, the thing that you have to articulate to these business leaders is that you need to explain to your employees that you're going to bring here why you're leaving where you were, being it California, Illinois, New York, or where have you. Because what we're finding is that there's a difference. There are people that are picking up and leaving these blue states individually because they're checking out. They got it. They can't take it anymore. But these people that are coming along with these businesses and corporations, they are still voting the same way they did back in the places where they came from. But yet these businesses and corporations are reaping the benefits of the tax policies and the economic policies here. But eventually they will take us down the wrong path, and we will end up being exactly like the states where they left. So I think it's very important that we start talking to the employees. We've had Toyota North America pick up and leave California. You've had Liberty Mutual. You've had Frito-Lay. I mean, so many, Fortune 500 corporations and companies are right here. And, when you look at Houston and Harris County, which I would tell you is the oil and natural gas capital of the world, now we see the infiltration of all these woke policies, the ESG policies into these corporations. And they're making decisions that are going against their best interests and the interests of the people here in Texas in the oil and gas industry.
Well, tell us, one of your taglines I saw, I think on your pin video, you ended off with "Fight Local, Win National," and that's a tagline which is not just for the US, but actually wherever you find yourselves here in the UK, that tagline could apply. Maybe you want to explain why you've used that tagline and what it means.
Well, I think you have to understand is when you look at a place like Dallas County, and we are the 8th or 9th largest county metroplex in the United States of America. And we have no elected Republicans in the Dallas County leadership. If you're losing locally, you're going to end up losing nationally. And what the left has done very well is that they come in and they focus on city council races. They focus on school board races. They focus on these county commission races. They focus on district attorney races. We have a district attorney here in Dallas County that was funded by George Soros. And just recently, he decided to not prosecute the case against a sex trafficker who kidnapped a girl from a Dallas Mavericks basketball game, raped her, and then put her into sex trafficking. She was found up in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And the district attorney here, John Creuzot, said he's not going to prosecute the case against them. So that's the problem. And furthermore, he has a policy, $750 or less, he doesn't prosecute criminals. Well, $750 is a lot to me. And if you rob me, you should, pay the consequences thereof. So if we don't fight locally, if we continue to allow the left to come in and take over these major population centers where you see the greatest amount of failure of their policies, you see the lack of law and order, you see the lack of good quality education, the focus on indoctrination instead, then the next thing you know, you flip a red state to a blue state. And you look at what is happening in my birth state from Georgia, where you have 2 avowed socialists now as the senators from the state of Georgia. And that's because of Atlanta, Columbus, Macon, Augusta, and Savannah. Those 5 metropolitan areas are the reason why you have that. So we have got to do a better job as conservatives, as Republicans, focusing local, like I said, fight local, and then that helps you to win national.
Before we get on to the GOP primaries, is part of the problem that people just think it's all good. The focus maybe is elsewhere on some of the more swing states, but actually I think Texas is in the bag. Is that part of the problem, that people just assume everything is good?
Well, yeah, there is that assumption that is there. And that, like I was taught as a kid, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. That's what assume means. But there's an apathy that is there as well. And I think that people have gotten very complacent in red states. And Peter, think about it. California used to be a red state. California had Ronald Reagan as a governor. You look at the state of Washington was a red state. And now the only place you find blue is in King County, Seattle, Tacoma, and that dictates the politics of that place. I mean, Nevada, Colorado used to be a red state, but now because of the taking over Denver and Boulder, now sifting down to Colorado Springs and, pushing out into the suburbs, Colorado is a blue state. And so I think that we have to start, again, focusing at that local level. So many people can tell you here in the United States of America who's running for president. And they can maybe tell you about, who their senator is and who their congressperson is. But they can't tell you about the city council member. They can't tell you about school board member. They can't tell you about their county commission. And even in a place like Dallas County, we don't have a Republican running for the sheriff's position coming up in this 2024 cycle. So what does that mean for law and order here in Dallas County?
Well, certainly hoping and praying that actually Republicans get out and do the right thing and vote to make sure they have proper representatives. But if I can look at the national side, obviously the primaries have been happening in Iowa. Trump triumphed there. DeSantis dropped out. Nikki Haley hangs on. We've just had the New Hampshire vote where, again, Donald Trump wins with a smaller majority, but still wins. Nikki Haley hangs on. Give us your assessment of of what is happening there.
Well, I think Ron DeSantis did the right thing. He maintained his honor, integrity, and character. He put all of his eggs in one basket, and that was Iowa, and he did not win a single county in Iowa. So he saw that the path forward for him was not good, and he ended up endorsing President Trump. I don't understand where Nikki Haley is going. I know that she is backed by some very, very, very big wealthy donors, and so the money will continue to come. But when you look at New Hampshire, which was an open primary, which means that, people can cross over and vote in that primary. And as a matter of fact, from what I saw in reports, she had between 70 to 73,000 people that were not registered Republicans that came across and voted for her. And still, she lost by double digits. So that has to send a message to you. Now they're going to transition to her home state of South Carolina, where she was a two-time governor there. If she is not successful in South Carolina, I don't understand how you can continue to justify you being in the race. And as long as she stays in there, we have this contentious primary. That takes away the time and resources for us to be able to unite behind one person and start focusing on the policies of the Biden administration and whoever maybe the left tries to throw in there, because I don't think they're going to take Joe Biden to the poll and later on this year.
Actually, let me pull you up on the open primary thing. It was UK media were discussing it today. And they were trying to make sense of this, where you have a candidate from one party, but actually you get independent, you get Democrats, they can all vote. Mm-hmm. It's a weird anomaly, is it not?
It is an absolutely weird anomaly. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that the Republican Party of Texas, and I was pushing for this back when I was the chairman, is for us to have closed primaries here in Texas. Because that's exactly what you see happening, people jumping across and, muddying up the waters in the other party. So I would think that you would want to have someone that is going to be on your team, elected by people that are on your team and not people that are jumping in trying to throw a monkey wrench into things. But again, it has to tell Nikki Haley something. It was very interesting, last night watching her. She came out very early and gave her speech when that margin was still very tight. I think the margin was like 6 or 7%, but I think the end margin ended up being, I think, closer to 11 or 12%. And like I said, with all of these independents and Democrats to cross over to vote for her, she was still very, very, not successful. So I just got a question, where does she see her path forward in this primary cycle?
Yeah, it's weird looking at. I can understand Ron DeSantis running until the primary first one, then dropping out when you don't get it. Nikki Haley hangs on, and her speech it sounded like a victory speech.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you've lost. It doesn't make sense, kind of what she wants. And how do you see it? Because obviously she's not going to get anything when Donald Trump actually wins and takes the White House. Others have been hoping, and they've dropped out with Vivek, with Tim Scott, and they're hoping to have a position. Nikki seems to have burned her bridges, so it doesn't seem to make any sense.
Well, that is absolutely true. You think about, here she was a very successful ambassador to the United Nations. She quits that job. She says she's not going to run for president if Trump is going to come back and run. And then she decides to run for president after, Trump has declared he's going to run. So she has burned her bridges, and I don't know where she goes after this. And again, if she continues to prosecute her endeavor, there comes a point in time when people are going to say, you're not sane. You're causing more harm to the movement, to the party, than good, and you're making this more so about you than about this country. And so I think that there's this decision point that really has to come up really soon for her, especially if she is not successful in South Carolina. And Tim Scott has already come out, as you know, he's the senator from South Carolina, and endorsed President Trump.
Well, moving on, I kind of understand her holding on if she thought she was going to have a chance. But I mean, with Iowa, it was well over 20 points. Trump won. New Hampshire, you said it was 11 or 12 points. And moving on to South Carolina, I think I read she's 20 points at least behind in her home state. I mean, if you're holding on for a win at some point in the race to give you that rush forward, then that's one issue. But she's going to lose in her home state. And to me, it would be much more sensible to pull out rather than suffer that embarrassment.
No, I firmly agree with you. I mean, because people always remember what was your last race and how did you fare? And if Nikki Haley goes down as a person that lost in her own home state by 20 percentage points, that doesn't bode well. But in her thought process, I mean, I've been looking at some of the statements from her campaign, is that they're again hoping for a lot of these open primary states that they can make a difference in those type of states. But if you saw what happened in New Hampshire, that's not going to bode well either, even if you do have an open primary.
It's, again, listening to the UK media, BBC and Sky, which I don't normally listen to, but I wanted to get their perspective, and they were saying Trump has won, but Haley is hanging in. She's got the independent, the Democrat vote, but she doesn't have the Republican vote. I mean, moving forward and looking at, I mean, even you've got Ronan McDaniel, the RNC chair, who I don't think either of us, I certainly from afar have zero respect for. Most Republicans don't have any because she seems to oversee a losing streak. But even she has come out and said the GOP should unite behind Trump. I think that's just a couple of hours ago she came out. I don't know whether she's just looking for a job or whether she actually believes that.
Well, I think it's just a matter of fact, and it's just a matter of truth. And again, the RNC, they need to be able to move beyond this primary thing so they can start focusing their resources as well. And they need to go out there and tap into donors so that they can run the national level campaign, because it is not just the presidential election cycle. Now you're talking about the congressional races that come up every 2 years. You're also talking about Senate races. So I think that, as long as Nikki Haley is staying in this, I mean, she's kind of a hindrance to the RNC being able to do that. And I think that she wants to shake that losing streak without a doubt so that she can get back into the W column. But again, I just think that if I'm Nikki Haley, waking up this morning, I've got to start looking at, how and where can I really bow out of this gracefully? Because the longer I stay in this, it makes it about me, and it does not make it about what's going forward. And let's be very honest. Independents and Democrats may vote for her in these open primaries. They're not going to vote for her in November.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. On my final thought with you before moving on to some others is the looking at who Trump picks, and obviously recently in the last few days, Tim Scott has been put forward. I think Vivek thought of himself as a VP candidate, but Tim Scott seems to be. He's got a good backstory. He is strongly conservative. He seems to kind of fit that bill. I mean, what are your thoughts as you look at how that ticket will work out?
Well, it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of jokes out there about, now all of a sudden he's decided to, have a fiance and propose marriage and everything like that. So, that's a telltale. But, the thing is, President Trump, if he wins this election in 2024, he's basically a lame duck president. He can only serve that one term. Yep. So his vice president's election has to be for the future. It has to be about making sure that we can maintain another 8 years of a constitutional conservative Republican in the White House and that type of administration. So I think that has to weigh heavy on who is selecting. And hopefully it's not about the identity politic, but it's about the best possible person out there that can really galvanize this country. And I will tell you, when you look at our economy, you look at our energy situation, you look at every single issue out there, we're hurting in the United States of America, Peter. And if the United States is hurting, the rest of the world is hurting. And that's why you see all this chaos and confusion all over the world.
Well, yeah, I want to touch on later on one of those, which is the immigration issue, which I know you cover regularly. But just my last thought on the campaign. I mean, as a Brit, I'm blown away by the money spent. I was looking through, and you've got, I think, just short of $200 million spent by Republican candidates, and this is actually before an actual presidential race. It is a whole industry, and I think us in the UK don't understand actually how that works and the vast sums of money that can be spent prior to actually the proper election.
Well, the thing is, your news publications and all these folks, they realize that this is a money-making scheme. Sometimes they raise the rates, for TV ads and ads in newspapers and radio ads and things of this nature, because they only get this opportunity so often. So, yes, it is a big money-making scheme. And I think at some point in time, we got to start looking at, is this really the type of scenario we want to have in America, where it's almost like an oligarchy can determine, who are the ones that are out there running for office, especially at a national level. And then you look at what's happening on a local level, we're completely disavowing it. So I think at some point in time, we got to start focusing on who are some of the good quality people out there that maybe, they're not millionaires, they're not billionaires, because I don't want to see us go down that path of having a rich elitist crew that is in charge of this country. And you think about it, I mean, Joe Biden goes into United States Senate, pretty much so nothing and a nobody. And now look at him. He's got, houses all over the dadgum place, beach houses and what have you. That's not what we want to have.
Not completely. Let me move on to one of the events you've had recently, and it's about getting people involved. And that was Boot Camp for Boomers.
Yeah.
And it's there in Florida. And that kind of 45 to 65, 1945, 1965, that group. I was one talk about that event, but also my thinking was, is there a danger that they become disengaged and hand over responsibility to, I guess, a more vocal, militant generation that's come up?
Well, the ACRU, the American Constitutional Rights Union, along with the Association for Mature American Citizens, we put this event on down there in the Villages, a beautiful place just north of Orlando, and is a senior retirement community. Because what I want to stress to the boomer generation is that we, and I'm at the tail end of the boomer generation, we are the ones that are the descendants of the World War II veterans. We're the descendants of the fellows who raised the flag on Mount Suribachi, who stormed the beaches of Normandy. And we have to step up and continue on with remembering the contributions of the greatest generation and not letting it be forgotten, upholding those principles and values. They are the ones that came back from war and built this incredible modern day industrial and economic machine that we call the United States of America. But when you look at our system of indoctrination, it's no longer a system of education. When you look at the fact that, how is it that we have young people in the United States of America, and you see it also in the UK right now, that are out there marching arm in arm with, an Islamic terrorist organization, these pro-Hamas supporters. I mean, these folks, they kill you if they had the chance. And so there's something where we're not telling the story that bridges the gaps between these generations. And that was the message that we want to send. And we want to get them engaged and get them involved. And again, not allow them to have this complacency, and to once again, talk to their children, talk to their grandchildren, and, not just keep pictures of them in their wallets and on their walls, but understand that what they do or not do right now will determine their future. So that was the message of the Boot Camp for Boomers.
It does seem to be a massive gap. And my huge concern is that that generation has not passed on the baton properly. They've kind of stepped aside and say, well, our time is finished, without actually raising up the next. And it shows having someone like Biden in the White House. Yeah. And that's the implications of that, I guess, not passing on the mantle to the next generation.
No, you're absolutely right. It is a relay race. And the thing about a relay race, you have an exchange zone. And, back in the day when I had a little bit more speed, I ran the 4x100 relay in high school. And you're supposed to exchange the baton in the exchange zone. If you do it too early, you're disqualified. You do it too late, you're disqualified. If you drop the baton, you're disqualified. And I think right now we have dropped that baton. And somehow we have got to go back to our basics and fundamentals and re-enter the race and make sure that we're passing that baton, which is the baton of liberty and freedom, to our subsequent generations.
Let me move on to one of the issues, which is immigration. I think one of your recent Steadfast and Loyal podcasts was on the cost of illegal immigration. Do you want to unpack that? What is the cost and how have we let this situation arise?
Well, when I look at this recent Supreme Court decision, I mean, we're upside down. We don't understand our rule of law. We don't understand our Constitution. We don't understand our national sovereignty. And so, we're a very generous people here in the United States of America. We want people to come here to our country, but we want you to knock at the front door. We don't want you to come into the back door. And this illegal immigration issue is now touching us in every single facet. It's an economic issue. It is a healthcare issue. It's an education issue. Who would have ever thought in New York City that, parents would be told the night prior, don't bring your kids to school because we're going to bring in illegals. What are they to do? Who's going to teach my child? Now I got to find childcare, those type of things. Not to mention the national security issue, the domestic security issue, the fentanyl crisis, the drug trafficking crisis, human and sex trafficking crisis. So we have got to get leaders back up there that understands that we have a national character, and part of that national character are our borders, and we have to protect those borders as a sovereign constitutional republic. And I believe that Europe has understood that. And I think that was one of the main reasons why you saw the UK pull out from the European Union, because they did not want a bunch of bureaucrats, telling them how they're supposed to, maintain and control their own borders. So this is a huge issue going in. As you saw the exit polling in New Hampshire, this is the number one issue over the economy. People are starting to see it and feel it.
And I saw that. I think I saw Ben Berkwim on there for Real America's Voice, and he was talking to voters and people there, and more or less all of them, when he asked what were their two issues, more or less all of them said illegal immigration, uncontrolled border. That is one of those two. And I don't know why that doesn't. I mean, I watched one of the press conferences, and one of the reporters was saying, why is this administration supporting illegal immigration? It was a pointed question, and I'm surprised the other in the media did not actually jump in that, because this is what affects people. You're right. It affects every part of our lives.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I just think the Biden administration is tone deaf. And you continue to have someone like Alexander Mayorkas, who is the head of our Homeland Security, saying that the border is secure. Well, he's basically telling us, don't believe your lying eyes. It does not make sense whatsoever. And when you look at the American Constitution, the federal government has a enumerated duty and responsibility. It's called the Guarantee Clause, Article 4, Section 4, to guarantee to every state in the union to protect them from invasion. They're not doing it. And for the Supreme Court to say that even if the federal government is not owning up to their part of the Constitution to protect sovereign states, then the states have no recourse. That was a huge decision that the Supreme Court made, because this can have ramifications for so many other aspects in that relationship between the federal government and the states. And the Constitution is very clear in Article 1, Section 10, Clause number 3, what the states can do if actually invaded when there is imminent danger without any admit of delay. So, what you have happening right now in the state of Texas, you just poured fuel on the fire of this whole Texit movement. Because they're saying if the federal government is telling us that they're not going to protect us, they're not going to protect our border, which is 1,249 miles that Texas shares with a deep stabilized country, which is Mexico, then someone has to step up to the plate. And I just pray Governor Abbott will do exactly that, step up to the plate and rise up to this challenge.
I mean, I watched that was 5-4 in telling Texas that they could not put barbed wire up. I was scratching my head there. I don't understand this. I don't understand how the Supreme Court could say you're not allowed to secure the border. We are stating it is not legal for you to secure the border. How do you get to that point where that is the legal decision of the Supreme Court?
You have to ask them. And we're not talking about, thousands of miles. We're talking about 46 to 48 miles. of concertina wire in one of the most heavily flooded places for illegal immigrants, right along Eagle Pass in that area. And so I'd like to ask, I mean, when was the last time any of these Supreme Court justices have been to the border? When have they seen what is going on? And furthermore, what do you have around the United States Supreme Court? You have a security fence. So basically what the Supreme Court said to us in the state of Texas, there are rules for thee and then there are rules for me. And this is not sitting well with people down here in Texas.
I mean, does that? It's a massive open door for President Trump to campaign on. And I mean, where does a president sit? Because the Supreme Court is the arbiter. It is the top. So where do you go if legally you're not actually allowed to have your border? Are there other ways? Is it just increasing border patrol? Is it just actually building the wall? I mean, where do the states go that actually need to control what's that inflow?
I think the state of Texas needs to defy what the Supreme Court said and make it very clear that we understand the issue of federalism. And we understand that the Supreme Court, the United States, the federal government is supreme over the states when they are doing things that are in pursuance thereof, Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, to the rule of law. If the federal government is not abiding by the rule of law, then we cannot have lawlessness. And the states have to have a recourse because we are sovereign states. And when you read the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, said that sovereign states created the United States of America, the federal government. It wasn't the other way around.
How do you go thinking what happened 2,000 years ago in Jesus' time, where there was a census and everyone had to travel and put their details down, and there was a census which is very different from what we have now, which is just you fill in a postal form, and if you don't, well, you don't. There has to be a way of removing actually the people who have come in illegally, and having how many is it, like 7 or 8 million? It's some bonkers figure of people that have flooded in during Biden's time. I mean, how do you begin to push back with Trump coming in? He is a lame duck, and I completely get that. Yet there has to be a massive change in actually trying to remove people. And I think in Germany, actually, they're having this conversation in Germany as well, where the party that are leading in Germany, the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, leading at 25% in the polls, they've talked about actually you need to deport people, you need to remove them, and send them back.
You have to. When you look at all these single military-age males that have come into this country illegally, and to include from a country like China, our number one geopolitical foe. So you got to go back to the policies that worked, that protected your border. You got to go back and have the Customs and Border Patrol agents doing what they're supposed to do, patrolling the border. You have to have ICE doing what is necessary to deport people, find them, and get them out of here. Now, what the left wants is they want everyone in the United States of America to be counted in a census, because what they want is larger representation. And that is really what's behind this. And furthermore, coming back to what I said, fight local, win national, you hear the governor of Pennsylvania, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, they're talking about illegals voting in local level elections. Well, if they vote in local level elections, they're going to vote in national level elections. What's to stop that? And especially when you have these Democrats, these progressive leftists that don't want to have voter registration roll review, they want to give illegals a driver's license, which means they have picture ID. And if you go back to 1996 with the motor voter law, which was passed under Bill Clinton, they'll get registered to vote. So it's all of these traps that we have to start closing and preventing these loopholes that the left has built into, really and truthfully, as Barack Obama said, fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
Just to kind of finish off on with the election, what are your thoughts? They're massive issues. The economy is obviously one of them, as well as the immigration. And here I look and think, how could anyone actually vote for Biden? I can understand not wanting to vote for the other candidate if you don't want to, but actually, how could you actually physically go and put an X or use your machines or whatever messed up system you guys have in some of your states. But what are the other issues? Is the economy the other big one? Is it actually American influence abroad, looking at the disastrous retreat in Afghanistan and other things are happening? Kind of, how do you see it on the doorstep, talking to voters? The border is one. Is the economy the other major one?
Yes, without a doubt. People feel it every day going to the gas pump. They feel it going to the grocery stores, and they feel that their dollar is not going as far as it used to. And they know that. They feel that. I think the other thing is their fear and concern from national security and domestic security aspect. They see, pro-Hamas supporters marching in their streets, blocking, airports and things of this nature. They don't want a terrorist organization doing this. They don't want to have their border controlled by another terrorist organization, the Mexican cartels. And I still think that educational freedom is important as well, because the indoctrination of our children has to stop. And you're finding more and more parents, Independent, Democrat, Republican, they're uniting on that issue. You're always going to have a contingent of people, like drill sergeants used to say when I was in the Army, just stuck on stupid, and they think everything is just absolutely fine, and they're going to vote for this because they're Marxists, they're socialists, they're leftists, and they want government control, they want power. But I think that 60 to 65% of the folks in the United States of America, they want something different. And that's why you see Joe Biden losing large swaths in the Black community and the Hispanic community, which is really sending up a red flag for them.
Well, let me finish off that point, because that was a really interesting part of one of the programs I listened to here in the UK this morning. And they actually focused on that they said Biden had 90% vote in the Black community or the Afro-American community. And actually that's down to about 60 or 65%.
Yes.
And they were debating this. Why would someone vote for Trump? But it's there. It plainly the people are moving away. Maybe finish off on that. What are your thoughts on that? Because that changes things considerably for Trump.
Well, when you start talking about the illegal immigration situation, look at the Black community in Chicago, saying that we don't want this. We don't want to have this loss of law and order when you're allowing all of this crime and criminality in these urban population centers. So Walmarts, Walgreens, drugstores, everyone is moving out. And so many places are becoming food deserts in our inner city communities. The level of crime, the lack of quality education. So people are starting to see these things, and they know that it was not that bad under a President Donald Trump. And remember what he said in Charlotte, North Carolina, to the Black community: what have you got to lose? And they have seen that, and now they're starting to say, we have a lot to lose. And I think that's where they'll come back to him.
And also fits into that community being more conservative, just like the Hispanic community being more conservative. And to me, it should be an automatic moving towards Trump and a more conservative vote.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely right. When you think about faith, family, individual responsibility, freedom, quality education, small business entrepreneurship, service to the nation, those are your basic conservative qualities. And I think when you go back and you look at the great educator and orator, Booker T. Washington, who I call the father of Black conservatism, he believed in education, entrepreneurship, and self-reliance. We got to get all communities back to that.
Just let me ask you, when is the date for the election, the local election there in Dallas for you?
The early voting will start 20 February, and the actual election day is Super Tuesday, which is the first Tuesday, March the 5th.
So soon after that, we'll see whether you're in that position or not. I look forward to inviting you back, possibly in your new position. Alan, thank you so much for your time. It's always fascinating to have your insight. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure, Peter. God bless.